This episode of Voices of the Elephant is brought to you by Nomad PHP. Start a habit of continuous learning. Visit nomadphp.com and subscribe today. Welcome to the Voices of the Elephant podcast. Each episode of Voices of the Elephant brings you an interview with a member of the PHP community. From project leaders to user group organizers, we talk to the people that are helping make the PHP community special. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Voices of the Elephant. This is Voices of the Elephant Live, and my special guest is my friend, Mr. Beau Simensen. Say hi to everybody, Beau.
Hey, everybody. How's it going today?
Beau, you're with Sensio Labs now as of, 3-4 months ago?
Yeah. I think it was beginning of September is when I first started.
Yeah, very good. And you and Ryan basically rule the roost in the U.S. office, from what I understand. So, if I need any of the black symphony elephants, I know who to call now. But but you've been there, and you guys have been doing some awesome stuff lately. And I want to talk to you about a couple of things. First of all, earlier this month, you were over in Berlin at Symphony Live Berlin, correct?
Yep. Symphony Live Berlin. I think it was the first week of December.
Wow, and y'all had like 1,200 people there.
Yeah, it was amazing.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
Hey,
yeah.
Let's take a side note that you're not actually prepared for, just to chase a rabbit for a minute. You and I go to a lot of PHP conferences.
Mm-hmm.
Why can Symphony Live get 1,200 people, but in the U.S., a general PHP conference targeting the same developers, ZenCon is the biggest at 500-600. It's just what I don't know whether to ask. What are you doing right, or what are we doing wrong, or what? What do you think the difference is?
Yeah, it's funny. We just talked about this on that podcast on the last episode that we soft launched, and I don't think I've actually put any tweets out on it yet. But yeah, that's something that I've noticed over the last 3 years. I've really only been doing conferencing for like maybe 2.5, 3 years, and the European conferences are just bigger. I went to Forum PHP. I think before Symphony Live Berlin, or SymphonyCon Berlin rather. Forum PHP was probably my largest conference I'd ever spoken at, and I think they had like 1,000 people,
wow.
And it was 700 to 1,000 people, and that conference was focusing just on the French audience. Like I was a rare person to be speaking English at that conference, so I don't know. I've just noticed like let's see, it's PHP Northwest is regularly over 500 people, or right around 500 people in Manchester. So I don't know. I want to say it's. I really don't know. It's something that I've been trying to figure out, especially since I've been trying to do more U.S.-based conference stuff this year. Like Symphony Live Chicago last year actually got canceled because they only had 14 people sign up for it.
I remember that. So obviously, maybe it is a European thing. Let's say that they've got a better train system, and
Yeah, it could be that. I mean, it could also be concentration. We've got a lot of people, but it's spread out over a lot more. So we're having a lot of regional conferences, and I almost feel like we've reached peak conference in the U.S. at this point, where the conferences in the U.S. that should be big, like PHP World, aren't as big because there's a lot of smaller community regional conferences happening. So I don't know.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I love the small community events, but yeah, it does siphon away from us having the huge ones. I mean, I remember when I used to run ZenCon, 800 was considered a okay number for us.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't great, and now that would be a phenomenal number for any U.S.-based PHP conference.
Yeah.
But I was just curious because it looked like y'all had a great time. You had my friend Jeffrey Jam. Yeah.
Yep.
You had Jam keynote on open source. That had to be interesting. The ties between Drupal and Symfony are very interesting to me.
Yeah. It definitely is changing, and it looks like some of us are going to be at DrupalCon in Baltimore next year as well. So from the Sensio team, so there is definitely a lot of crossover between Drupal and Symfony. One of the things I did want to mention was that Symfony Lives are different than SymfonyCon. Symfony Live events are the regional or country-specific events. So like Symfony Live Berlin is going to be like a German-speaking audience. Symfony Live France, but SymphonyCon is the once-a-year international event. So that's the big one that if you want to go and see talks in English and see like people from all over the world talk about Symfony, that's why SymphonyCon is usually larger. So the Symfony Live events are usually, yeah.
It's interesting, and it's even more impressive since obviously that was a German-only audience or a German target audience, and you still managed to pull big numbers.
Well, SymphonyCon wasn't. That's the difference. That SymphonyCon in Berlin was the international big conference that had 1,200 people.
Okay. Okay, I had it listed as Symphony Live Berlin, but it was SymphonyCon. So, okay, very good. Well, moving on from the confusion, one of the things that y'all launched there is Symphony Flex.
Yes, Symphony Flex was something that Fabian was super excited to talk about. So he brought that up, and if I remember correctly, he didn't actually get through his whole talk because he was excited to show how everything was working. It looks like it's going to be a very exciting thing, but a lot of the things that were announced at the keynotes, or the two things that were announced at the keynotes, are still experimental. Not experimental, but they're not ready for prime time yet. So some of these things are kept pretty close. So all I've been able to see on Symphony Flex is what I saw during the keynote. But it sounds like it's going to be a super exciting change for the Symphony community. Yeah, so it should be pretty cool.
Okay, for those of us who are not at the keynote, even though you don't have much to talk about, give us a brief overview of what is Symphony Flex.
Yeah, so a brief overview of Symphony Flex is it's not an edition. So there's Symfony Standard Edition. There's several other editions within Symfony. I think Drupal has something similar. Magento has something similar where you have like base installs of Symfony and base installs of Drupal, base installs of Magento, and you build on it and change it as you need to. But that isn't really a nice way to start a new application always, because it always means you either have to add stuff that wasn't in there by default, or you have to take stuff out that was added there by default. So like, for example, Symfony Standard Edition is highly integrated with Doctrine, but not everybody's using Doctrine. Not everybody needs Doctrine. There's people using completely different persistence layers now than what Symfony Standard Edition was targeting. I don't know, this was like 5, 6, 7 years ago. I don't really remember when Symfony 2 really became a thing, where they started to have the Standard Edition. But the whole space has changed since then. So what Symphony Flex is trying to do is sort of step into a role of saying, okay, here, you want to start an application, you want it to be based on Symfony, and you need certain things added to it, and you don't want it to take anything out. So what Symphony Flex is going to allow you to do is bootstrap your application, add bundles that will automatically configure the bundles for you, or at least automatically add them to the application. If you look at, one of the points that he made was, if you look at a lot of Symfony bundles, the README, the first part of the README is basically how to install it and make sure that it's configured correctly. And that's stuff that you shouldn't have to worry about. So if you look at other frameworks that are sort of excelling at this whole idea of developer experience, Laravel is probably the big one that comes to mind. It's really easy to get up and running with the new Laravel or Lumen application. It's not necessarily that easy to get up and running on a Symfony application, because if you install Symfony Standard Edition, you got to rip stuff out. If you install the Symfony demo, you got to rip stuff out, and there's already a bunch of stuff in there. So it's trying to fill a gap to make it easier to bootstrap an application, but also continue to configure it and change it over time, so you can easily add a bundle without having to worry about what that entails, or taking stuff back out. If you remove a bundle, for example, in Symfony, you might have to remove configuration. You have to remove, a line in one of the files that adds that bundle to the application. You have to remember to go and do all those things. And Symfony Flex's goal is to try and do that for you, so you don't have to worry about it anymore. So
this is analogous to Laravel's artisan command, or artisan?
No, it's probably closer to. Well, Symfony has an installer, so you can install Symfony using a command line installer. I think Lumen does as well, where you can create a new service. You could say Lumen new, and then create a thing, and it basically creates a skeleton Lumen app for you that
Okay.
you can go in. So it starts there, but then adds the ability to add in additional bundles. So you could say, okay, well, I'm going to just make up commands because I don't remember what they were. But like if you say, flex create demo, and you want to create a demo application, and what it's going to add, I think it'll actually ask you some questions like, do you need this? Do you need that? Do you need that? So it'll ask you which components you need or what sort of things you're doing. And then afterwards, you can do flex add bundle, say blog bundle, and then flex add bundle Broadway. So if you want to use Broadway for like event sourcing type stuff, you could add that in, and it's going to know which files need to be updated so that it will automatically compose or install those applications for you, or those extensions, but then also go into the application and enable the bundles appropriately. So it's more than just a one-off installer, and it's not part of the application. Well, I'm pretty sure it's actually like its own standalone thing. It's not something like Artisan where your application has Artisan in it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's an outside thing, but I'm not 100% certain on that. So it's not really
Okay.
like Artisan. Yeah.
So if it's the way you're thinking, then it would not ship into production or anything like that. This is a development side tool.
Yep. It's a development side
Okay.
tool. At the very least, it would be independent of your application. So it might live in vendor bin flex once your application is actually installed, but it isn't going to be like your core application that you build on top of. So like Artisan, the way that Artisan works with Laravel is that Artisan does some of that stuff, but that's also where you add your custom commands to your app. That's not what Flex would be. Flex would be its own standalone thing that its job is to configure your application, and then you could still have your own bin console that does all the stuff for your app that's separate from Flex.
Oh, very cool. It sounds very interesting. Can't wait to see this actually release and get out into beta so that people can start poking at it.
Yeah.
Hey, before we move on to the next topic, I want to stop and say a word about our sponsor. While I do that, I'm going to give a shout out to Andrew Kaya. I hope that's how you pronounce your name, and Bill Kondo. And I mentioned those two because those two that I recognize that are in attendance that are also members of Nomad PHP. And we'd like to take a moment to recognize the sponsor, which is Nomad PHP, one of my other projects. See, as a PHP developer, you know you have to stay current. You have to learn new things constantly, and Nomad PHP helps with that. We bring the talks that you see at conferences right to your desktop or your mobile device. Now, these are industry experts like Beau Simensen, who's given a couple of our talks, and they're talking to you about the latest topics. This is new stuff. We never do a beginner's talk on anything. Nomad PHP is for mid to senior level PHP developers, or those who want to become mid to senior level PHP developers. There's some great stuff out there for beginners. We're not that. So join senior PHP developers from around the world as we gather twice a month to learn things. Start your habit of continuous learning today by subscribing to Nomad PHP, and you can get that information at nomadphp.com. Okay, now on to the big topic that everybody's wondering about. Because I've been out to the website, and the only thing I really got from it was, hey, you ripped off Space Invaders. Talk to us about Sensio Cloud. What is Sensio Cloud?
Yeah, so Sensio Cloud is the first thing that first major announcement that was made at SymphonyCon Berlin, and Sensio Cloud is designed to be a platform for developers to build applications and launch them without having to focus a whole lot on deployment pipeline or any sort of the DevOpsy thing. So like, there are definitely places that will benefit from having internal DevOps or actually doing DevOps on your own. But there are also a lot of shops that want to build, say, a Symfony application, and they just want to deploy it. And they don't want to have to worry about managing servers or anything along those lines. So what Sensio Cloud is targeting is Symfony developers who want to build an application based on Symfony and deploy it in such a way that they don't have to spend a lot of time worrying about the infrastructure. The infrastructure is actually configured alongside the code so that when you save your code and push your code up, it's based on Git. It's all in the same place. So when you look at your application, you can look into the file to see what your infrastructure is going to look like. So it's ties it all together, puts it all together, so it's actually a very nice solution. Since kind of like Symphony Flex, Sensio Cloud, it isn't going to be something that people can use until I think it's the end of January, early February. So it also is early release, and so there's still some things that you can look at, like there's the Space Invaders movie, as you call it, on the website. So just to describe what you're seeing there, that is the end goal is to be able to do the Symfony installer, installing the Symfony demo. So we talked about Flex earlier, that this would be analogous to the Flex command to create your application. Basically, if you create your application, go into your application, there's one command you would run would be Sensio.cloud init. And at the end of Sensio.cloud init, you would basically have that application you just created deployed somewhere on the web now, so that you can go look at the application on Sensio.cloud. So that's what that little video is actually showing you.
I love the little open command. I assume that doesn't just display the URL, it actually pops open a browser for you?
Yeah, yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's very cool. Okay, so it is, in effect, a hosting platform.
It is, yeah. So it's really got three parts. It is a hosting platform, a fully managed stack where you can go and configure the infrastructure, and yeah, so it provides a lot of support for developers. That's something that Fabian's been very adamant about, is that he wants this to be a tool that developers want to use, geared toward developers, command line for everything, so that you can go in and do everything you need to do from the command line, so you don't have to go to like a web UI, for example. So he's been very excited about making this managed stack, but specifically for developers to use, as opposed to like a DevOps team or whatever. He wants it to be for developers to be able to run around and do things. And then the other part of it is that it's optimized and supported by optimized for Symfony and supported by Senseo Labs. So basically, if you run into problems, that the Senseo Labs team, the people who actually build Symfony, are the people who can actually look at the application, help you figure out what's wrong with it. So
if I forget my login password, I just call you and you can take care of it. No,
exactly.
Yeah. Okay, well that's great. Now, you said it hooks into Git, so I'm assuming it's something like you tag a release and that tags automatically get pushed, or so it can't obviously be every check-in gets pushed.
Well, every check-in that you push gets built.
Okay, so you push. I control that. It's not something automatic that I have to worry about.
Right. Yeah.
I tell it, push this one.
Yeah, the best way to think about it is if you're integrating with GitHub, for example, or if you normally use GitHub, you would have your GitHub remote, Git remote, and then you would have your Sensio Cloud remote as well. So as soon as you push to Sensio Cloud's remote, the build process kicks in and it builds that commit. So you can do everything you want to in your own Git workflow, and then as soon as you're ready to actually put it into production or put it into staging or put it into like some sort of PR dev environment, you'd be able to do that as well. You'd push it to a new branch. That new branch would then kick off a brand new build, a brand new environment, which is actually one of the nice advantages of Sensio Cloud and other systems like it, is that it makes it really nice for being able to do full deployments of an application for PRs. So if you want to do like end-to-end testing, for example, you usually have to have the full application available, like if, full stack, website, database, all of that, users that you can log into the site to do end-to-end testing. It actually makes it really useful for one of Sensio's other products, which is Blackfire. Because Blackfire does performance testing, but it can't do like static analysis stuff like on unit tests. It actually needs an application running that you can run the actual URLs to see how those URLs are performing with the full stack under it. So it really gives you this nice way to have spin up, without doing any extra work, you can spin up new clones of your environment really easily. And you can do so you can do that. Like if you think of like standard QA teams have the ability to fire up a specific branch and say, okay, I'm going to go test this developer's branch. I've been in teams before where there's been a lot of work put into making that process possible so that they can choose whichever branch they want to and say, okay, it's up and running. That just comes by default. That capability will be built into Sensio Cloud, so you won't have to do anything like that by hand.
Well, now, I've worked with several systems like this, and the two questions that always asked immediately is, what about database? Do I have to maintain my own database, or does this come with some persistent storage or database layer that I can work with?
So the database layer, the persistence layers are managed within the infrastructure. You can
Okay.
specify, I want a MySQL database or MariaDB database or Postgres database, Redis, whatever you want. You can basically create multiple of those if you want to. If you want to have multiple databases, maybe you want Redis and MySQL and two Postgres instances because you want them separated for whatever reason, you'd be able to do something like that as well. And then you're able to connect to it locally. And I think I've used Pantheon in the past, like once or twice, and Pantheon had that had a workflow that let you move from dev to staging to prod for code, and then data could go from prod to staging to dev. So you could like pull the database down to the different layers, and I don't know all of the details of it, but I believe there's something similar with Sensio.cloud as well, where you can get the data from production down into one of your other environments really easily. You can basically sync the data to say, I want all of the data from the master branch into my PR branch, and it would do that for you just fine. There's also something that is kind of nice is Sensio Cloud has tunnels. So you can open up tunnels to one of your environments. So if you have a production environment, you would be able to open up a tunnel from your local workstation to the remote environment, or the live Postgres database or live MySQL database, and run your code in development against the data stores in production. Now that might
And I
not be
assume I could always use my data tools and all that as well.
Yep. Yeah. So you could use the SQL workbench and all of these different tools that you might have locally. You'd be able to use as well. So that could be really nice. It might not be the best idea to work with the production data, but what you can do is sync that data to a developer branch somewhere or a developer environment, and then open up the tunnel to the development environment, so that you're at least not touching production data with your tools.
Yes.
But you get the same effect. So it's really up to you how you want to do that. But that functionality is actually pretty cool to be able to do that.
And it's amazing to me. First of all, I need to say I used to work for Pantheon, and when I was there, I had 8 or 10 sites that I had set up for testing and stuff, and being able to move stuff back and forward was very cool. But it's amazing how many companies, good, solid hosting companies, don't realize that if they're dealing with developers, then yes, you have to give us access to the database for our tooling. We've got to get in there, whether it's MySQL Workbench or SQL or SQL Pro or something like that. I've got to be able to touch that database with that, and so many of them just don't do that. But now you alluded to, when you said tunnels, you alluded to the fact, or the answer to my next question, which is the other question. When I was at Pantheon, the number one question I got was, well, can I get SSH access into it? Can I get SSH access into Sensio Cloud?
Yes, you can, and you actually get access. I believe you get access to the actual running instances. I know services like
nice.
Heroku, if you open up, you can get SSH access into a specific worker or into a specific process, and that spins up a new dyno. So that you're not actually looking at the dynos that are actually in production. You just spun up a new one for the time of that SSH connection. At least I think that's how that works. I'm pretty sure I remember seeing that. But this actually lets you, Sensio Cloud, you actually SSH into the server itself that's up and running, so that you can poke around and see what the server that you actually have provisioned is doing.
Okay. Well, very cool. Hey, before I let you go, I want to talk or ask you the same question I ask everybody. What's your local user group? What's the URL?
Local user group is Madison PHP, and the URL is madisonphp.com.
And there we have it. We brought this around to the original topic of conferences, because y'all host one of the best community conferences out there. But Beth and that team really do a fantastic job, and have for several years. I think I was at the very first one, and
nice.
it was amazing then. But it is just such a wonderful community feel to it. We've got a lot of great conferences in the PHP community, but I always love Madison. Hey, you've been in the community for quite some time. Your wife does beautiful art. I've been loving the ornaments that she's been doing. What's the URL for her website?
It's ninjagirl.com. Ninjagrl.com. So there's no I in girl. Yep.
If you're looking for great open source art, or well, you can't get it for this year, but she's been doing some just beautiful Christmas tree ornaments. Go check out Rebecca's site, because that is just great.
She has some pull requests up.
Really?
So some pull request ornaments. So from her pull request picture she did a couple of ornaments. She'd be excited if some people wanted to get some of those for Christmas.
Well, I tweeted out, we're in a townhouse this year, but next year we'll hopefully be in a house, and our goal is to have a Christmas tree here in Nomad World Headquarters, and it will have a lot of Rebecca's ornaments on it, because they are so cute. Hey, you're doing an awful lot for the PHP community. You know, you said you've only been speaking at conferences for like 3 years, but it seems like you've always been here. And so I want to thank you for taking the time to be here on Nomad PHP, taking time out of your schedule. But just as a community member, thank you for all that you're doing to help us in the PHP community.
Well, you're welcome, Cal. Thank you.
And with that, we're going to wrap it up. Thank you for everybody who has joined us live. Make sure that you go check out Sensio Cloud, right?
Yep, Sensio.cloud.
I've been saying Symphony Cloud, but that's not right. Make sure you go check out sensio.cloud.com, and you can visit.
It's Sensio.cloud.
Oh, Sensio.cloud. Okay.
Yep.
And you can check out our website at voicesoftheelephant.com. Elephant is, of course, spelled ELEPHPANT. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to Voices of the Elephant. Voices of the Elephant is copyright EICC Incorporated and released under a Creative Commons Attribution, No Derivatives, Share and Share Alike license. To nominate someone to be a guest on Voices of the Elephant, visit our website and click on the Nominate link. The URL is voicesoftheelephant.com. Elephant is, of course, spelled ELEPHPANT.